Hello everyone, this is Counter Yellow, bringing you another video in Star Trek Online. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the Somerville, the fleet, and the regular version for the C-Store, and its KDF equivalent in today's video. We will be talking about that in a little bit. The reason why I'm still a little bit kind of off kilter is due to what just happened a couple of days ago. From some personal stuff for me, Nog was one of my favorite characters in Deep Space Nine, alongside Sisko, of course, because Sisko was an awesome kind of like mirror on Captain Picard. And it was nice seeing kind of like normal expectations put on their head between Star Trek Next Generation and Star Trek Deep Space Nine, and also seeing a captain having to deal with war in the Star Trek universe over several seasons, and it being written for the most part well. And Nog was one of those kind of casualties of war during that. Feel free to see that whole series if you want to go more in depth in terms of what happened to him and those things with him. There's been a lot of articles written about Aaron Eisenberg. A lot of people have put out YouTube videos. I don't feel like that I could do him justice by talking about him much in a video here on YouTube. So feel free to see all those other people who have done awesome stuff on him over like the past couple of days. So yeah, just see all those. I will link in the top corner here the video that Trek Heralds just did recently. But there is seriously a lot of great stuff that has been gone on and talked about with Aaron. So feel free to see all of those. So yeah, with that said, let's go ahead and talk about the starships for this video. The new Intel science vessels that we're getting, the Somerville and the however the world you actually say that. I'm not going to say this in the entire video at all because I just can't. The stats, I mean, when you look at the base stats with the hull improvement, the base stats are okay. Not great, but they're okay for science vessels from the fleet. They are from Tier 2 military whenever you get the fleet version, so Tier 2 military means that it's supposed to be accessible to most captains, but it's not necessarily needs to be the most spectacular ship, so that's okay in that sense. Generally in this game, if you have a commander intel, part of the reason why the intel abilities are kind of lackluster is because alongside of the intel abilities, what you're supposed to have is some sort of enhancement to the cloaking abilities on your starship. Whether that's to be adding a cloak to a ship that normally doesn't have one, or to enhance the cloak of what would already be on the starship typically. Originally, when the Tier 6 starships came out with Commander Intelligence, and back in the day, Klingon starships did not have battle cloaks standard on them. What Commander Intelligence did was made their cloaks into battle cloaks. Nowadays, within the past year and a half, battle cloaks have become standard on all Klingon vessels that have been released. So in my opinion, this should have been an enhanced battle cloak. If that Commander Intelligence aspect is supposed to be enhancing a cloak, it should have been enhancing this battle cloak, just like the last Discovery battle cruiser was supposed to have an enhanced battle cloak, and it didn't with this Commander Intelligence. But anyway, alongside this, the C-Store version also has a Starship trait and console. In my opinion, the trait sounds like it's going to be good, and the console sounds like it's going to be garbage. But we'll cover that towards the end of this video. When you look at the stats, a big thing of note here is that the stats gives you 10% higher hull and shield ratio. Additionally, you get a 5th science console. That is something that is big and important to note here, is that the damage potential of these starships in the C-Store are going to be noticeably lower because you are down 1 science console. And for science starships, science consoles matter the most. In my opinion, it should have been an engineering console down, but that's just me personally. These ships do have a decent turn and impulse rating. And so from the fleet, they are some of the fastest ships inside of the game, which is kind of nice, but we'll show you some stats and you'll probably be more underwhelmed. Now, when it comes to the fleet starships themselves, I'm dividing this into fleet starships and then all other starships. There aren't a ton of science starships available from the fleet, which might be surprising, might not be to some of you, but that's just the way that it is inside of the game. So when it comes to science vessels, we'll talk about Federation ones first because the Federation has access to a large amount of starships in comparison. In my opinion, the Sutherland, or the fleet version of the Fleet Hernandez, is based upon the Fleet Scryer. Everything about this is basically based around it. When you look at the stats, it's a slightly lower hull ratio for a slightly higher shield ratio to the Starship. The Starship had lower ratios because of a different thing, which I'll probably cover in a moment. And to compensate for it being a slightly less sturdy Starship, it's got a slightly higher impulse in turning over the Scryer. And additionally, this ship is a bit more offensive oriented in terms of weapons, with a Lieutenant Commander Tactical over the Lieutenant Commander Science of the Fleet Scryer. I think I should have meant that it should have had 4 tactical, but anyway. It still is a commander intelligence and a lieutenant intelligence between both of these starships. And they both have cloak and regular intelligence gathering capabilities on both of them. And so now with a new Discovery starship available, since there's a Klingon equivalent to this starship that has a battle cloak instead of a cloak, essentially now we have a Klingon version of the Scryer available to KDF captains, which is nice. Klingons didn't have access to a ship like this before from the fleet. The Fleet Nautilus for Federation captains is still, in my opinion, one of the best science vessels in the game, period. And it's from Tier 2 military. Downside to this ship is that its looks can be lackluster, especially because it's just this look and a TOS look available to it. I think it's called the Daedalus, if I remember correctly, is what the TOS look skin is. But it's a very solid ship. Decent ratios. Both those ratios are higher than the Hernandez, by the way. And it's Commander Temper Operative, which is generally considered better for science DPS. And it's also faster, with a slightly worse turning, but slightly better impulse over the Fleet Sutherland. Downside is that the Fleet Nautilus does not have any equivalent whatsoever for KDF captains and KDF allies. So hopefully, if Cryptic continues with this mode, hopefully they add a KDF equivalent of the Fleet Nautilus to KDF captains. Hopefully they do that in the future. For some other fleet starships for Federation captains, here are 2 more starships. These were released at the same time as the Fleet Scryer. All 3 of those ships were released with the Delta Rising expansion whenever the game went from a level 50 cap to a level 60 cap, with Tier 6 starships added to the game in 2014, which has been a while ago at this point, so a lot of you probably don't even remember that. That was about the time when I joined this game and actually started playing. It was just a couple months prior to that when I started. And it was around then when the episode Surface Tension was really big inside of the game. Anyway, both these ships, to modern standards, are pretty lackluster. It's just 1 specialist seat in the entire thing and 3 lieutenant seats. So it's also why you basically never see this ship at all in the game. Its console's pretty lackluster from the C-Store. You will see this one from time to time because it's Voyager. And you have the unique ablative armor console, which is not available to other starships just because it has a unique visual that I would imagine was pretty expensive to put into the game itself. So adding that ablative armor effect to any other starship would have probably been way too expensive to do. I mean, they're already doing all those really fancy shield skins inside this game right now. That's probably eating up a lot of their production budget for each new starship that they're releasing. It's probably one of the reasons or excuses that they're giving as to why they're releasing less starships from each quarter versus what they used to do inside of this game. The other last fleet starship that's available for science in comparison to this one is the Fleet Advanced Research Vessel. This is from a 3 starship pack, except this is the fleet version of them, along with a KDF and Romulan version, which we'll cover in the next 2 slides. The downside to these starships is that they have a really high hull ratio comparatively. Versus all the other starships, this is the highest one by far in the fleet. Downside is that it only has 2 tactical consoles. So with these ships, you have to rely upon your science-esque damage abilities to actually be effective inside the game. You can't rely upon doing some science stuff, but also do lots of energy damage too. These ones, you have to go full energy and exotic-based stuff to be effective. But at the same time, you have a lot of hull versus normal. To get much more hull than this, you have to go to a spearhead, a multiple science vessel, or to go to what are they called? The science dreadnoughts as well inside the game to get stuff higher in terms of hull ratios than this. So you're basically getting a higher hull ratio to get less tactical consoles, so you have to rely upon your abilities instead of weapons to do damage. So there's just that. For KDF, that's basically your only other option right now from the fleet. For actual KDF-esque looks from your fleet, you have the fleet Nagsov, I think is how you pronounce that, which actually looks Klingon-esque. In my opinion, they did a really good job of making it feel like a science vessel, but also feel like that it's KDF. And so, in my opinion, in terms of design things that Cryptic has done, I think this is one of the better starships out there inside the game. It's got a very good hull ratio, frankly. Same thing though, that it only has 2 tactical consoles. Or you can choose this starship, however you say this, and you've got a battle cloak over the standard cloak that a lot of these ships just used to have. Klingons used to only have a cloak, while the Romulans had a Romulan battle cloak, just the way it was. You basically get a slower ship that's much more durable versus a much faster ship that is less durable. Same shield ratio, just lower hull and faster impulse. It's funny that the ratios are actually the exact same here. Now, for science ships that are available to everyone from the fleet is the Romulan Warbird, which has a smidget less shields to get that battle cloak. And then you have the Lucaria Generous Scout Ship available from your colony if you get it to Tier 5 colony, which is really expensive in terms of dilithium. But if you manage to get it there, you're able to get this ship, which is actually the only ship, to my understanding anyway, that gives you a starship trait and starship console if you get just the fleet version. Because there is no C-Star version, it's the only ship in the game that there is a fleet version, but there is no C-Store version. So because of that, there's a trading console on the fleet starship itself. It's also why technically it's not called the Fleet Lucaria Generous Scout Ship, it's just called the Lucaria Generous Scout Ship, and it's available from your fleet colony. It's also one of the few science raiders inside the game, so there is that too. So yeah, for TLDR for fleet stuff, there's 6 that are Federation specific. There are 2 that are KDF specific and 2 that are cross faction. So yeah, there's 8 starships to choose from if you're a Federation captain. If you're a Klingon captain, you only have 4 science starships from the fleet to choose from. There's a huge disparity that still needs to be bridged for the KDF faction. Hopefully Cryptic resolves that within the next couple of years. Now let's go ahead and go to the C-Store and the exchange. I will obviously cover the C-Store ones first because I feel like those are the better deals overall to go for, especially because of how expensive science builds can be. Now the budget ones can be really cheap, but once you start trying to add lots of traits that are normally only from the exchange, these can get expensive really fast. So first off, the 2 that I will cover right off the bat is the Eternal, multiple science vessel, which for a long time I've been touting that this is the best cross-faction science vessel in the game, and I still say that it is. A close second, though, is the Romulan Reconnaissance Explorer Warbird, because Romulan ships are now cross-faction. Getting a slight downside of no Commander Temporal Operative, but you get access to a Romulan Battle Cloak, and you can use the auxiliary dual heavy cannons that are off of these particular ships. Plus you have 4 attack consoles instead of 3. Plus, yeah, these ships are still decent as well. The stats are relatively similar between these guys, slightly lower stats to get that battle cloak and more offensive potential on these things. So if Commander Temporal Operative is more your thing, the Eternal is probably the way to go. If you really want a battle cloak science vessel, which is really rare in this game, by the way, one of your Reconnaissance Explorer Warbirds might be the way to go for you. Keep in mind, the Reconnaissance Explorer Warbirds are in a 9-pack mega bundle. There's 3 Federation ones, 3 KDF ones, and 3 Romulan ones. The Federation ones and KDF ones have slightly higher base stats, but otherwise they're going to be looking the exact same as the Romulan one. And the Romulan has a Battle Cloak and the other ones don't. So there is that for you. The other good C-Store one is the Cardassian Intel Science Dreadnought. It's got pretty balanced stats, but it's also but it has 4 weapons in the front and 3 in the back. Its bridge armor scene is not very flexible though, so you have that to work around. But as long as you're okay with this bridge officer layout, it's honestly a fairly solid ship. All the other Science Dreadnoughts are stuck to be getting from the exchange. Two of those exchange Science Dreadnoughts are from promotion packs, which are really ridiculously expensive. And then there's of course the Paradox as well, but I won't be covering that in this video. I've covered that in most of my other science comparisons videos. Now from the exchange, these are some of my more favorite ones. Of course, they're going to be mentioned first. The Sona Command Science Vessel is the only Commander Science Command ship in the game. It's also a really fast ship. So if you actually want a Commander Command vessel inside of PvP, this is probably your best option to choose overall. The Voth Bastille Temporal Science Vessel, in many ways, is just the Eternal, but slightly more defensive oriented. Especially if you want to be a science tank inside the game. The Voth Bastille, if you have the full 3-piece Voth console set, the Voth Bastille is a smidge better than the Eternal. Otherwise, the Eternal does most of what this ship is going to be able to do as well. Just saying. The Narcoldin Science Vessel is another great PvP option. No Commander Specialist seat, but it's got a 0.2 impulse rating, plus it's got a built-in Battle Cloak to the ship as well. So, plus the console that comes with this ship is quite often banned in PvP. It's one of the most commonly banned consoles in the game just because of how annoying it can be in PvP. But it is a great survival console for PvE in terms of general DPS builds. The Crossfield's one, in my opinion, one of the most I would say partly balanced, but more of that it's got really nice stats with decent maneuverability and decent impulse considering everything else that's available to it. No Commander Specialist seat, but outside of that, it's a very solid ship inside the game. The Vern, with the recent update, in that it got a Commander Temporal Operative seat addition, this can be a potential beast in terms of stats as well. The fact that you can have 7 Temporal Operative abilities, plus you can still add another 5 science abilities on top of that. I'm not saying that's actually be optimal by any means. You still could with the improved Photonic Officer trait and Photonic Officer, but you could potentially have almost your entire build be Science Magic for your Bridge Officer seating if you had someone else that was healing you. Iktomi is a pretty noble ship because it's got the highest shield ratio currently inside the game at 1.5. It's also got the improved Photonic Officer trait, which is why you'll commonly see this being bought and sold on the exchange. I wish the Tier 5 Tholian Science Vessel was still in the game because it was the best budget science vessel, but I digress. The Sphere Builder Multiple Science Vessel and the Herc Assembly Multiple Science Vessel are all also pretty solid ships. The Sphere Builder one is just a higher hull ratio with the standard shield ratio, while the Herc one has a slightly higher hull to get with slightly lower shields. It's almost like the Crossfield, but it's only got 1 specialist seat, and it's got a hangar bay as well. Your personal cup of tea as to if those are worthwhile for you to get. The Sphere Builder one is one of the better DPS science ships to my understanding as well inside of the game. Now for some other thoughts for this video. That's a picture of the console, by the way, which I don't think is going to be very good, but maybe I'll be wrong on that. The C-Store console itself, what it basically does, at least from the description, some people might already be testing this in the game, might be able to give you better insight into this, is that when you activate the console, you start dropping some mycelial anomalies behind your ship that do damage whenever enemies get too close to it. And then it also gives you some extra aux power and scientific readiness. So it's extra scientific cooldowns on the console itself. the console sounds pretty lackluster in my opinion. It's the trait is what probably saves this for me in terms of a lot of science players potentially buying this ship or the two-piece if they have both KDF and Federation captains. With the C-Store trait, whenever you use a science or an intelligence ability, it makes any anomalies that you do, probably including the console, but especially things like Gravity Well, makes any of your anomalies deal extra electrical damage and deals extra power drain. To me, this basically sounds like it's going to add extra DPS to your Gravity Well, and it's also going to add a power drain like what Tychon's Rift is doing already inside the game. So this sounds potentially interesting, and also because this is from the C-Store instead of from the exchange, that's a nice plus to this as well. Fleet versions obviously don't have that. This is just the C-Store version. The Fleet version is literally just the Fleet Scryer, but slightly different stats. And also, it has as a version that KDF captains can actually access. So, if you happen to be a KDF captain and wanted to fly the Fleet Scryer but couldn't, now you've got a different weird Gorn-esque, honestly looking ship, but it's Discovery, to fly instead. Again, here's the inequality, just in case you all missed that from earlier in the video. And in my opinion, it would be really nice if Cryptic added a Commander Science Miracle Worker or a Commander Science Pilot seat to the game for Science Captains. Science Miracle Worker would just flat out sell, period, because Miracle Worker, anything sells in this game right now. Commander Science Pilot would be insane for PvP. However, I mean, PvP doesn't incredibly sell in this game, so at least to my understanding, because the PvP crowd's pretty small. But I mean, it also should sell decently because most of the PvP players in this game do have a lot of money to keep on spending to keep their PvP builds up to date with everything. For the real TLDR of this video, we have some new Intel Science Starships to the game. These basically, if you don't want to look at the actual stats for this, just look at the old Fleet Scryer, and basically have a ship that's slightly faster but have lower stats, and that's basically what this ship is, except it's got two variants, one for the Federation and one for the KDF. The difference is just that the Federation one just has a regular cloak. The Klingon version has a battle cloak on it. Other than that, they're basically the same thing. The C-Store trait sounds like it's going to be good. I don't know if it's going to replace any traits that regular Science DPS captains have in their builds, but it should still be decent, especially if you're only going to be using C-Store traits for your Science builds. This one's probably going to be one of them you might want to include in there. A C-Store console doesn't sound very good, frankly. You're ejecting stuff behind your ship. Typically, Science vessels are wanting to have everything be in front of their ship. It's also why the improved non-linear regression is actually a pretty decent survival trait for Science ships, because you just send everything forward. If it's stuff behind your ship, it's almost like you're having to try to fly around and trying to get them in the wake, almost like a lot of pilot ships might want to be, which is why I think this should have been probably a Commander Pilot Science ship. That would have made this much cooler, but anyway. This is from Tier 2 Military, so it doesn't have to be as strong, but then again, the Fleet Nautilus, which is one of the best Science ships in the game, especially from the Fleet, is also from Tier 2 Military, so there is that as well. But the thing is, it might be Tier 3. Maybe it is Tier 3, and I haven't checked in a while. But anyway, those are the two new Science Starships in the game. I think if I saw that blog correctly, it actually is releasing today. So feel free to check these out if you so choose. There probably is a sale on these as well. I would wait a day or two though and have other players in the game review these first before you buy them at all. Unless, of course, you're someone who's a fan of the Star Trek Discovery comics and really want this ship. Then, of course, feel free to go ahead and buy this ship. Yeah, that's my stuff for this video. Thank you all for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.